ISIS wannabes in Michigan. 2 men arrested before a Halloween terrorist attack could be carried out. I'll tell you how the feds found them and who else is involved. Plus, Senator Marsha Blackburn says one of Google's AI products accused her of sexually assaulting someone who doesn't exist. I've got Google's reaction to the claim. And a 13-year-old kidnapped by a reported sex trafficker miraculously found more than 1,000 miles from her home. How was she lured away? The answer is every parent's worst fear. Those stories and more today, Tuesday, November 4th. It's Election Day. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. Happy Election Day to all who are over 18 and can legally vote. Here in New York, there's record-breaking turnout for a mayoral race, and maybe that's not a surprise given the stakes. Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani remains the frontrunner, but President Trump tried to change that Monday night, writing on Truth Social, quote, "A vote for Curtis Sliwa, who looks much better without the beret, is a vote for Mamdani. Whether you personally like Andrew Cuomo or not, you really have no choice. You must vote for him and hope he does a fantastic job." Okay, I don't know if we would call that a ringing endorsement, but the man has a point. The beret really does have to go. Now, early voting data suggests a large turnout in the youth vote, and that's likely good news for Mamdani, given that they came out in droves to vote for him in the primary earlier this year. But if Mamdani does pull off his historic victory, a new survey suggests that hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers will flee. Maybe they'll head across the river to New Jersey, where the governor's race in the Garden State seems to be anyone's bet. Republican Jack Ciattarelli's campaign is banking on polls undercounting the Republican vote, hoping that that means his campaign will have a very good election night. However, polls still show Democrat Mikey Sherrill with a whisker of a lead. Now, President Trump is pouring money into the Get Out the Vote effort in the Garden State and in Virginia, where he hasn't officially endorsed Republican Winsome Earl Sears. When asked about that, one GOP operative told the Post, quote, "Trump doesn't endorse losers." Tell us how you really feel. Win some, lose some. He's betting gonna lose some. Politics is a dirty game, my friends. Now, as it stands, the only thing we can do right now is to get out and vote. And of course, I will have all the key results here for you tomorrow. Google is cutting back access to one of its AI tools called Gemma after Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn claimed that it made up allegations about her. Really troubling ones, specifically that she committed sexual misconduct. Gemma was asked if Blackburn had been accused of rape, and it apparently responded that the Tennessee senator, quote, was accused of having a sexual relationship with a state trooper during her 1987 campaign for state senate. The AI bot continued that Blackburn, quote, pressured him to obtain prescription drugs for her, and that the relationship involved non-consensual acts. Needless to say, this never happened. She says the guy doesn't even exist, but Gemma doubled down and even created fake links to fake news articles. Blackburn sent a letter to Google CEO Sundar Pichai demanding action, and after that letter went public, Google pulled Gemma from its publicly accessible AI studio. The company also noted that Gemma was not meant to function as a typical chatbot does, like its other product, Gemini. Gemma was built for use by developers. Google also noted that AI hallucinations, which I guess is evidently what this was, are an industry-wide problem and not limited to its products. Yeah, sure. But to be fair, Google's is the one that hallucinated a sitting U.S. senator as a sexual assaulter. Authorities in Michigan say they successfully thwarted a terrorist attack over Halloween weekend. 2 local men are facing charges of supplying weapons for an ISIS-like attack in the U.S. and had allegedly been scouting LGBTQ-friendly bars in a suburb of Detroit as targets. Authorities say they were inspired by the Paris attacks in 2015 that killed 130 people. Mahmed Ali and Majid Mahmoud of Dearborn were allegedly planning to carry out the attack on Halloween night. Now, the criminal complaint also refers to 5 unidentified co-conspirators, as well as a minor who was allegedly going to carry out the attack with Ali. And the plan was apparently for everyone else to flee to Syria to join ISIS. Now, investigators say they tailed the 2 men for weeks as they looked for targets and practiced at a local gun range. Feds raided the suspects' homes and a storage unit before any kind of gruesome attack could be carried out. Authorities say that they recovered 3 AR-15 style rifles, 2 shotguns, 4 pistols, more than 1,600 rounds of ammunition, and a trove of planning information. The Trump administration filed court documents on Monday making it official. The food stamps program known as SNAP will be funded partially, despite the government shutdown that is now tied for the longest ever. Now, the move comes after two federal judges ruled last week that President Trump had to fund the food benefits program, and he agreed to dip into the Department of Agriculture's SNAP contingency fund to pay out the aid, which sounds like a lifeline for the 42 million Americans in need. But let's dig into the numbers a bit more. That contingency fund has about $4.65 billion in it, but the feds spend about $8 billion each month on SNAP, which equates to roughly $190 a month in assistance to each recipient. That means the beneficiaries of the program will get about half of what they normally would for the month of November. So what happens after that, and how much longer could all this go on? For that, I'm joined now by the Post politics reporter Ryan King. So Ryan, sticking with SNAP benefits to start, the people who need the assistance are going to get some of it this month. Then what? Is there a contingency fund for the contingency fund, or is this it?
Yeah, that's the big question. Right now, it looks like, according to court documents, that the Trump administration is going to be able to fund about half of the usual SNAP benefits that would go out. There was another option called the Child Nutrition Program that they had talked about tapping into, but decided against doing that this time around. So in theory, if the contingency fund were to run out, they could tap into that. They had a lot of concerns about tapping into that because Congress would need to re-up funding. It's not an automatic thing. And there were no guarantees that Congress would do so. So right now, the contingency fund is the last thing, but we'll see if it comes to that.
So looking at the broader shutdown, as of later today, it will be the longest ever. Where do negotiations stand? Is the pressure mounting on either side to make a deal at this point?
Yeah, there's definitely mounting pressure, but right now we haven't seen any major movements. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has talked about targeting. Yes, it's pretty bleak. And Senate Majority Leader John Thune has talked about targeting some rank and file Democrats to see if he can pick up a few defections. He only needs 5 defections from Democrats. So it seems like that's kind of the approach as opposed to talking with Democratic leadership. Some of the sources I've talked to have indicated that all eyes are kind of on Election Day and what comes after. There's some hope that after the off-year elections in New Jersey, Virginia, and elsewhere, that maybe some Democrats will be willing to come around. House Speaker Mike Johnson said something to that earlier in the day to reporters. But pressure is definitely starting to mount because, as we've seen, with funding running out for SNAP, there are concerns about that a few weeks from now once they run through the contingency fund. There are other programs like WIC and other things that could run out. There's also concerns about paying the troops again in a few weeks. Even though President Trump has moved money around, there are concerns about how much more of that he can do. So pressure is definitely mounting, and maybe we'll see some developments this week. But right now, we haven't seen any big movements.
If Election Day could kind of make or break some of these negotiations or discussions or the stalemate, the Election Day is today. So we could be having a completely different conversation tomorrow or the next day. And you know that I will bring you back here if that happens. But Ryan, I want to ask you about President Trump. He seemed to draw a line in the sand this week saying that he won't be held hostage by Democrats who he says have lost their way. So have they lost their way? Some critics suggest that the Dems aren't dealing because there's a fear that if they do, it's going to anger the base and they won't win the midterms next fall. So what are your Democratic sources saying?
Well, a lot of Democrats have felt that they needed to put up more of a fight. They've obviously had a lot of big pressure from the progressive left to do so. It is a pretty unique situation that Democrats are in because typically Democrats aren't on the demanding side of some of the recent government shutdown fights that we've had. And, I've heard a lot of mixed reactions from Democrat sources. There are some staffers that will echo Bernie Sanders, who has basically argued that Democrats shouldn't cave. He was really concerned about Democrats potentially caving, it seems like, within the coming days. And he put out a big statement advising against that. There are some Democrats I've talked to that have said that they think that they will have gotten their message across, even if they don't succeed in getting the concessions from Republicans on Obamacare and healthcare in general. There are also a handful of Democrats that will quietly admit that they don't think that this was ever a winning strategy. But I think at the end of the day, what we've seen historically is these government shutdown fights haven't really had a big impact on elections. So a lot of Democrats aren't really concerned about this impacting them in the midterm elections. And they think, they're in a favorable position with the government shutdown in a lot of polling. So they do have that going for them. But President Trump is clearly growing pretty frustrated. And one of the things we've heard him say recently is that he would like Republicans to use the nuclear option and take out the filibuster, which requires 60 votes in the Senate. That's what the Democrats have been using to block the bill to reopen the government, because they've already cleared the House with that bill. So if they were to use the nuclear option, it would be gone. But a lot of Republicans are reluctant to do that. So, all eyes are on Democrats to see what happens in the next couple of days.
Yeah, and Election Day. We're going to see if this Election Day today moves the needle at all for the government shutdown later this week. Ryan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
A missing 13-year-old girl from Louisiana was found alive, and that's a miracle. But start to finish, this story will break your heart. The young teen was discovered hidden in a box covered by a sheet more than 1,000 miles from home in the basement of a house in Pittsburgh. Authorities say a 26-year-old alleged sex trafficker named Kyshawn Crumity repeatedly abused the girl and tricked her into thinking she was being adopted. He also allegedly plied the child with alcohol and fed her marijuana edibles. So how did these two even come into contact with one another? Well, they met via Snapchat, but it didn't take long for Crumity to allegedly convince the girl to travel by bus from Louisiana to Pennsylvania. The way authorities say he coerced her is just cruel by telling her trusted adults were waiting there to make her a part of their family. Now, Crumity is charged with a bunch of serious crimes, including sex trafficking, sexual assault, and providing alcohol to a minor. And a second man, Ronald Smith, was also arrested in Georgia on charges of kidnapping and contributing to the delinquency of a juvenile for his role in taking her allegedly to the first part of her trip north. Now, officials say that there were others involved and they also face charges in this case. And finally today, Michelle Obama is offering a new peek behind the curtain of her time in the White House in her new book, The Look. The photo-heavy tome focuses on her highly lauded style and the power of fashion. In it, the former First Lady writes, quote, "We were all too aware that as a first Black couple, we couldn't afford any missteps, and that as a Black woman, I was under a particularly white-hot glare." Now, Obama also tackles the reality of being a woman in the limelight and how often they get diminished, writing, "If somebody wants to go after a woman, the first thing they do is go after our looks, our size, our physical being." Now, over the past year, Obama has had people talking because she skipped two big political events, President Trump's second inauguration and Jimmy Carter's funeral. Her husband, Barack Obama, you'll remember him, he was the president. He attended both alone. Of course, that sparked rumors of marital trouble, something the couple both shot down. She blamed her absence from the inauguration on, ready for this? Not having anything to wear. If that is not a meta full circle book promotional tactic, I don't know what is. All right, my friends, if you have an election in your area and haven't gone out to vote yet, please make sure that you do. Dare I say, this is actually a tremendous podcast to listen to while you are waiting in line to cast your ballot. And obviously, all of the post-election coverage, see how that kind of works both ways? Post-election coverage, you get it. Everything you need. It's going to be right here tomorrow morning. I will be waiting for you. So don't forget, like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. If you miss any crucial details while you're snoozing tonight, I'll be waiting to fill you in first thing in the morning.